popcorn ready.
There we go. That's you.
Earning the reputation of giving all the right ingredients, uninhibited, in exposing the hard, cold facts about the Watchtower Society.
Disney.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome in to another Six Screen Saturday night. Boy, we have an awesome program coming up. I am so glad to have Barbara and her husband, Joe, affiliated with the Six Screens. They have made a big difference. I have to tell you, when you think about people who have left the Watchtower, that have really made an indelible mark in people's brains, so many people have listened to Barbara and Joe, and Barbara's been on many, many programs, including Dateline and numerous programs, documentaries concerning the Jehovah's Witnesses. So we're so pleased to have her own program here on the Six Screens. It's called Watchtower Insider. Barbara Anderson Speaks Out. Well, my name is Rick Farron. I'm coming to you from the Six Screens control panel up here in Boston, Massachusetts. And, you know, we've been doing this now for 20 years. We have never missed a Saturday night. We are here because you are here. And tonight, I'll tell you, I don't know what's going on here tonight, but I'm looking at my computer screen. We got so many people already coming in. We've got a special treat for you tonight. We've got some sound files or clips that Barbara Anderson has been preserving, and you may never have heard these clips anywhere before. Now, these are Watchtower officials talking, and I know that you're going to be fascinated. So let's bring Joe and Barbara on, say hello to them right now, and that way we'll make sure things are going good. Hello, Barbara. Hello, Joe.
Hello.
Hi, Rick.
So there we go.
I'm so glad to be here.
Boy, I'll tell you, I don't know. Did you call all your relatives? I just had a relative. You might have heard her. Her name is Robin. She said, yeah. In fact, he was talking on the.
That's our relative.
Yeah, that's Joe's niece.
Yeah, she's here right now. Robin, say hello to your aunt and uncle.
Hey, Aunt Barbara. Hey, Uncle Joe. I already have my popcorn popped, and I'm listening.
Okay, nice talking with you.
She's on a telephone line. So no, I tell you, I'm looking at the computer screen here, Barbara. I'm getting flabbergasted. I can't believe how many people are coming in here tonight.
Rick, you tell everybody that. Come on.
Well, I'm serious. I don't know what's happening. I know the Watchtower is really hemorrhaging, big time. It's amazing to me. And, you know, more and more people, they can't believe what's going on in the Watchtower. So they're trying to find stuff from the apostates. They're saying, well, maybe the apostates have the answer because I can't figure it out, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Well,
All right.
If you want to get rich, just stay with the Watchtower and get involved with them. I mean, really involved. Offer your stock market input and, you know, that kind of thing. And you'll live happily ever after. That's what they're doing.
Well, no, they're doing things that if you guys were still in Bethel today, you'd probably say, hey, get me out of here fast, you know, because it's just too much. I don't know how a Bethelite can even stand it anymore. I really don't. But anyways, I think perhaps what we should do, a sad story this week. We had, James Penton. And, you know, if you're listening in, I mean, I think most people know who James Penton was. I mean, if you want to talk about a man that really made a difference helping people get out of the Watchtower, he was an author. He was a historian. He's up in Canada. And we've had him on our program numerous times in the past, like many years ago. But James Penton, sad to say, he passed away this week. And he's going to be missed. He really, really is. I was trying to even get him to come to our convention that we got coming up in 2025. But, of course, that's not going to happen now. But, James, I'll tell you, you rest in peace. You've helped so many people. But I'm going to I know Barbara and Joe, they were personal friends with James Penton.
Yes.
And I'm just going to put up here, Barbara, just so the audience can see it. James Penton was an author, And I have all of his books, but there's 2 books here that I really found helped me so much leaving the Watchtower. This one right here, mostly. That
Yes.
book right there, Jehovah's Witnesses and the Third Right. When I read that book, that really gave me an understanding of how scandalous, how deceptive the Watchtower organization is. In that book, James Penton talks about how Rutherford. He talks about how Rutherford cozied up to Hitler. See, in fact, what happened is in Germany, Magdeburg, Germany was a Bethel office, and it was
branch.
yeah, it was the second largest branch at the time. United States was number 1, but Magdeburg, Germany was number 2. And what Rutherford was thinking is Hitler might just, confiscate the property and take it over and close the Bethel branch down in Germany. So he wrote a letter, and James Penton talked about it in that book right there, on how he wrote a letter to Hitler, cozying up to him, hoping to get Hitler's favor so that he wouldn't turn ugly on the Watchtower. And it's an unbelievable book. But that really, in fact, I'll tell you, that was one of the first books that I read getting out of the Watchtower. What would you like to say about that, Barbara? Anything?
Oh, I certainly do. Jim and I had a talk not that long ago, about 4 months ago, about something in the book. And I was rereading many chapters after the years ago that I read the entire book. And the Watchtower sent a representative not too long ago to Germany to try to get the German government to acknowledge the witnesses who died for their religion. They were in a park in Berlin. There's all these places that you can go and read about the different people, different groups that died at the hands of the Nazis, and they died for their beliefs. Okay, so what came up was that the Watchtower wanted Jehovah's Witnesses' name to be in that park. I read about it in an Israeli newspaper, mind you, not in a German newspaper. And so I called Jim about this, and we discussed it, because I said to Jim, the reason those people died was because of Rutherford. What he did, he put them in at the very center site of the Nazis due to one particular circumstance when he told Rutherford and Nord told the witnesses to go out in the middle of the night and distribute a paper on defending the witnesses. Of course, that was just after they adopted their name, and so this just turned the tide against the witnesses. But many of them did go to prison over that, not to the camps at that point. But it was their leaders that were responsible for so much death and destruction in this religion. It wasn't, if the witnesses had stayed in the background, they wouldn't have been carted off to prison. But the Rutherford kept pushing them out into the center. So when I was saying to Jim, I really want to write a letter. I want to write a letter and explain that about the circumstance here. And it was the leaders were responsible for their deaths through the hands of the Nazis. And he was so kind to me by saying, whatever you do, he said, just make sure that the witnesses get the recognition that they deserve, because they lost their lives for their belief. And he said, we don't want to take that away from them and just put it on the problem on the leaders. Although he agreed with me on that. That was Jim. He was always concerned about the rank and file, and he had a heart as big as they come.
Well, no doubt he did. We had him on our program years ago. Let's say going back, if you go back about 15 years ago, James came on a number of times on our Richard Rowie program here on the Six Screens. And, what I wanted to say is, numerous books have been written. Numerous books have been written about the Jehovah's Witness movement. James always approached it from a very professional viewpoint. I can say that with full credit for James, because he really did present it in a professional way. Now I'm going to show you another book right here that, in my estimation, is a book that's helped so many people. Let's see if I can't get that up right now.
I'm going to jump ahead of you.
So okay, let's get this right here. Well, that's Apocalypse Delayed. Now, James knew what he was talking about. He did. And he's presented in this publication, he talks not only from the inside, but also he recognizes that many people realize that Jehovah's Witnesses have got some issues. They have some issues with, military, with voting. They have issues with blood transfusions, but he approaches it. I like the way he approached it very realistically, and he could really connect with people. His writing was really good. Of course, he was a very intelligent man, but he was able to convey to the audience, at least in reading that book, that Jehovah's Witnesses have some serious problems, and the world is starting to recognize it. And, if James was able to stay with us, I think he'd be so glad to see, just in a few years, if he was able to live another couple of years, we're going to see monumental changes, Barbara, monumental changes.
Jim had a plan for another book. It was already in his mind, and he was trying to lay it out. I heard from a very close friend of his after Jim died, and he told me that that Jim was really vulnerable as far as his health, and he had fallen a number of times, and he had increasing difficulty to get words out, but he was a clear thinker, as he always has been. So he never lost the ability to think and sort things out. Consequently, he could still write on with the computer, even though he couldn't express himself. But as a professor, teacher, he had marvelous use of language. He spoke German. He spoke Spanish, fluent Spanish. So, but in his the last week, he was in the hospital for a few days, and it looked as if he had pneumonia, and then so he became unconscious, and he never was conscious again, and he passed away with his wife, and his son David were with him. Both were, from what I was told, if you could have gratification over this, it was that he didn't suffer anymore, because he had suffered. So he had bad arthritis in his last years. So, but he was a real worker. He had such a fiery disposition, and I'll turn it over to you. But I want to tell some experiences that we had. We spent 5 weeks with the Pentons. His previous wife, Marilyn, and him, she died a number of years ago. I don't know, maybe 9 years ago or something like that. But we had a fabulous time. When they lived in Mexico, we went there and stayed with them for 2 weeks. And then they came here to Tennessee and stayed with us for a few weeks. And then we four went on to Florida and stayed together. It was an interesting time. You know what we talked about all the time. So I don't want to, I want you to share what you know.
Well, I'll tell you, in fact, in the book Apocalypse Delayed, when you're first leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses, there's a lot of people that have a real bone to pick with the Watchtower. I'm really, but sometimes you gravitate toward people that are sensible minded, people that are telling a straight story. And I feel that's what James Penton did when he came on our program years ago. I felt that's what he was doing. He wasn't totally, machine gunning the witnesses down,
That's
but
right.
but he used a word. He used a word in his book Apocalypse Delayed that I'll never forget. And I never really, in fact, even I don't hear this word used too much, but the word he used is apocalypticism. Apocalypticism.
Mm,
I
that's
never heard
good.
it's hard saying it, but apocalypticism. Now that is what he tried to explain is that is a problem. There are many religions, not just Jehovah's Witnesses, but they always present the apocalypse as on the horizon. It's coming. Armageddon, just hang on here. It's right around the corner. It's at the end of this, the tip of the pencil. But apocalypticism is a word that he used, and he tried to explain to people that they were wrong with this. They kept saying it's coming, and it never came. They had such failed prophecies. And really, that's something in itself, Barbara and Joe. The failed prophecies of the Watchtower should be enough to get people to move to the exit door at the Kingdom Hall. If you have a person that comes forward and tells you this is it, this is what's happening, and it doesn't happen, and you say it over and over again, how much credibility can you put in them? So he discusses the fact that they've been saying this for so many years and nothing ever happened. And then he even mentions in the book that even the general public, that they're on to the Jehovah's Witness game. That even them, sometimes I never thought of that. I never really did that. Even the general public is aware of the false prophecies of the Watchtower, Barbara.
Interesting, yes. Well, witnesses have been going door to door for such a long period of time, and if somebody opened their door in 1945 to them and they were still a lot of 40, 50 years later, it's obvious witnesses, what they said in the 40s, it never came true. So, it's obvious that especially the news people and writers, they have the sources at their fingertips with the internet. It's so easy to track the witnesses' theology and the constant changes. Well, we're most of the witnesses are not too fond of the Catholics, but they don't change their doctrines. They don't change it. They change their more like their policies. So the policies are fluid, but not the doctrines. So but Jehovah's Witnesses, they change everything except what they do leave, and they never talk about it anymore. Is hellfire, immortal soul, and Trinity. It's never mentioned. But
well, Barbara, just thinking out loud here. Now, what would you, if James was still with us? Now, what would you say to James? I know his wife died earlier too, a few years back. But what would you say to James if he was still with us right now and listening in? What would you say to James?
We would talk about right away. I'm sure we start talking about the three corporations that the Watchtower has started in Ireland, and all the assets at the Watchtowers and different corporations, the assets that were part of them. Everything's part of those three corporations in Ireland. So the Watchtower people are in New York, upstate New York, and everything. They claim they don't have any assets. So that's what Jim and I would probably talk about. But your question's a good one, because Jim and I, we really can get into it. And the first time I ever talked to him, I was just out of the witnesses for probably a month or so. I called, the first person I called was Alan Fallbacher. And you're going to hear, of course, everybody's going to hear about him a little later. And he was out of the witnesses, and I knew him since he was 4 years old. And I was 14 when I was baptized. His father was the congregation servant in Long Island, where I became a witness. So I caught up with a lot of what was going on after I left the witnesses with Alan. And so he told me then about Jim Penton. I had some things I wanted to discuss with Penton. I read his material, so I called him on the phone, introduced myself, and we were having an interesting discussion. But I said something to him that was he wrote in Apocalypse Delayed that I didn't agree with. And so I didn't know the man, but I was used to discussing this type of stuff with men who were in the organization and out of the organization, who considered themselves researchers and scholars and so forth. So I said, I didn't agree with what you said about, and it was specifically about Mrs. Russell. And I said, you said in your book that she was a liar. And I said, that's not true. And we got into it because Jim had a powerful personality. He wasn't angry, and I wasn't angry, but we were knocking heads. So we knocked heads for years, and we had a lot of fun doing it. And one time in Guadalajara, when we were staying with him in Mexico, he and I got into a discussion, and Joe was sitting there just listening, and so was Marilyn. And they would pop up and say something once in a while. But Jim was getting a little hot and over this topic. And I said, no, I don't agree at all. And I got up, and I saw his bookcase where he kept, this is one of the reprints, the Watchtower reprints. And I knew exactly what the answer was to what we were arguing over. And so I got up and I went over there. I didn't say a word. I pulled the book down because there's 7 of them. And I walked over to him and I opened it up, but I wouldn't let him see what book it was. I didn't let him see it was number 7. I covered it up with my hands. And I said, what does it say right there? And he read it, and his voice changed. And so he says, I'm tired. I'm going to nap. And Marilyn got to laughing about it. She said he always does that when he loses. And so off he went. About 2 hours later, we were just having a nice leisurely afternoon. He comes out of there, and I want to tell you, that's why I loved him, because he didn't take himself that seriously. But he said, you know what? He said, I was thinking about this. And he said, you were absolutely right. And Marilyn started laughing, and she said to him, you met your match. Well, he's a professor, and I'm a nothing. So, but I knew what I was talking about, and I got him. And that was more fun, and that's what I remember about Jim. And I miss that. On the phone even. Oh, it was wonderful. But Joe had a different arrangement and idea of companionship with Jim. They got along very well. Marilyn was wonderful. But when Jim remarried, he married a very fine woman, and she made him very happy for his last years.
Well, very good, Barbara. Very good. So, we're going to miss Jim Penton, but I do know this, that if I had something to say to Jim, you did a great job really bringing a lot of people out of the Watchtower. Thank you, Jim Penton.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Barbara, now I think before we move on to these sound files that you never heard before.
Yeah. Hey, before I do that, let me tell everybody that Jim started a publishing house, and it's called Heart Publishing. And it published Pearson's book, Rutherford's Coup, and it's printing other books to do with the subjects we love. So keep it in mind, folks. If you want to publish a book, that John his son is going to continue. From what I gather, he's going to continue the publishing house. I call it company, but in Canada, and so books will be continuing to come through them. So I just wanted everybody to know that. By the way, Jim was 92 when he died. I believe 92 and a half, or somewhere right in there.
Well, it looks like we do have a lot of people. Before we move to the next subject, we do have some people who want to call in. Go ahead. It looks like we got caller 931. Did you want to say something, 931? Go ahead. All right. Let's go to caller 630. 630, you're on with us.
Oh, Rick, how you doing? It's Mark. How are you?
Yes, Mark. So you're listening in tonight. Did you know James
Yes.
Penton? Did you ever hear about him?
I've heard about him. I don't know that much about him, but I have heard about him, and I'm very impressed that he brought a lot of people out of that Watchtower Society. That's real good. That's very impressive, and I'm very happy that he did that. But I didn't know too much about him. But he obviously is someone you know. Is that correct?
Yeah. He's been on the program numerous times. 15 years ago. Well, you were just a young kid at the time, but 15 years ago, he's come on the program. Yeah. So we were just kind of letting people realize that he died this week. He passed away, and he did help many people. Yeah, he died. Yeah, it was terrible.
He passed away this past week. Well,
he was 92. He was suffering, some illnesses and what have you. But he did pass away this week. So we want to just at least mention him this week. Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you for coming in.
Sorry to hear that.
Yep.
Very sorry to hear that. But yeah, Rick, I hope you're doing well, and your show's great, and you're doing a totally awesome job. Rick, keep up the really good work, and keep on going, man. You're really reaching out to a lot of people and giving them the good help and assistance and support they really need. So that's great. So just keep right on going, Rick. Your show's totally awesome, and you got my support always, Rick, 100%. And in the future, I'm looking forward to all your other ideal programs that you'll be having, and sounds like it's a really bright future we're looking forward to.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Yeah. And by the way, Rick, I need to ask you also: is your big convention still going to be on in the summer of 2025?
Oh yeah, no. We got so many people writing in; they want to come. I'll talk about that on JW World News tonight. But it's just escalating like crazy. Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you very much, Rick. You take care. God bless you, and I'll talk to you in the future. Take care now.
Thank you.
Yep,
all right. Well, I guess what we're going to do, Barbara, why don't we do this before we move on to the fascinating.
Hey, Rick.
Yes, go ahead. You with us? Go ahead.
Hey, this is Stephen. I just had a quick anecdote. I actually read Apocalypse Delayed. I was so impressed. And I sent an email. It was on a Friday, late Friday. I sent an email to James, Mr. Penton, telling him how much I enjoyed the book and just wishing him well. And do you know that when I got back in the office first thing on Monday morning, my first email was a response from Mr. Penton, Dr. Penton. And we had a little bit of a dialogue. He said to me, "Oh, I see you're in Illinois. Would you happen to be in Chicago?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, I plan on coming to Chicago for something." And I said, "Well, if you make it here," I said, "and you let me know when you're coming," I said, "dinner's on me." And then immediately after that is when COVID hit. And so, of course, all those travel plans were put off. But I was just amazed that I just sent me an email. I didn't expect or truthfully even want a response. I just wanted to express my appreciation for the work that went into that very fine book. And lo and behold, this man, despite what all he had going on, had time to respond back. And like I said, we had a couple emails going back and forth. So I was very sad to hear about his passing.
Well, thank you for saying that, Stefan. No, it's just sad. When you have, as people get older, we're starting to lose a lot of people. But I'm glad they have their footprints. I'm glad they have, we have James on the 6 screens. You got a number of YouTube videos up. So at least their footprints are still here. And we can all go back and listen to it and help so many people. Thank you, Stefan. All
Hey,
right.
Rick.
Yes, who's this?
This is Robin. I just want to say, have anyone read my aunt's book that she wrote, Barbara Anderson, Uncensored, Eyewitness to Deceit, Discoveries of a Former Jehovah's Witness Insider?
I didn't make that arrangement. Rick, I gotta tell you, she's doing this on. She. Thank you, Robin. Thank you.
Well, Robin, what I can get out of this tonight, you really love your Aunt Barbara and Uncle Joe, don't you?
Yeah,
You really do. I can just tell that.
Yeah, more than life itself, I do. I love them both.
Oh, we remember when she was a tiny little girl. Now she's half our age. I'm not going to say how old she is.
Well, Robin, thank you for coming in tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm actually 65, but I only claim to be 49. So, yeah.
You don't sound 65. You really don't.
She's a great grandmother.
I have a book. I do have a book. Yes, I do. I've read it halfway through.
What book? What book you have, Apostle Babe? What book you got? Barbara's book?
Yes.
You do? Well, good for you.
Yeah. Barbara Anderson, Uncensored. Yes. Eyewitness to Deceit.
Well, good. Well, thank you,
that one.
Thank you, Apostle Babe.
And I would love it if somebody would make an audio version of that.
Well, you never know what would be in the future. There's a lot of material to be added to that book. And I hope I live long enough to do it, because so much has happened and there's so many interesting things that we want to share with everyone. So it's about the only way to do it, other than on 6 screens. So I've wanted to do a podcast for years, and Rick has been promising one of these days I do that. And there's just a monumental amount of new unpublished material that I could use in such a thing. But anyway, that's the future. We look to the future just the way that Jim did. And so we go strong at this, because it's very important to set people free from what the Watchtower has done to their lives, which is all downhill.
Read about the history. I'm sorry to interrupt. When we get to read about the history, we get to connect the dots and understand why we were treated a certain way, or why things fell into place at a certain time,
Right.
And there's a whole lot of unspoken doctrines or rules, or on a need-to-know basis, and you don't get to know until you find yourself in the spot. All kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. It was most illuminating for me to work at the headquarters on what came to be called the Proclaimers. We just call it Proclaimers, but anyway, because there's so much about the history of the organization that has not been published, either by the latest or when I was at headquarters in the 80s, early 90s, they didn't even know their own history. So, but we look at the history from a different angle than they do. And we see the parts of the history that caused that led up to the downfall of this group. The decisions made over the years, the kind of people that were in it, and Jim was great about piecing all that together. He did that in Canada about the Duplessis reign. Remember, the witnesses were banned in Canada in the 40s, I guess. And Jim worked on a book on that, and he put all that together. The government of Canada gave a award to him for the kind of research that he did. So it's important to put all this together. Jehovah's Witnesses have played a big part, even though we're a small group, but a big part in the history of this country. And I worked on the 30th chapter of the Proclaimer's book, which is all about the Supreme Court decisions. And those decisions, because of Jehovah's Witnesses, actually were a part of setting free Americans, the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion, it was all tested by Jehovah's Witnesses. So it's important to know all the different angles. And we're going to hear one little tape tonight that I had, and there's a famous voice on there that played a great part in the Supreme Court, but that's not what he's talking about in the 6-7 minute little tape. But we need to look at the whole picture, just not at the and lose ourselves in anger because we didn't get the chance to get higher education, all that. Seeing the big picture, I think, wipes away the bitterness, and then we can progress better with our lives. Right, Rick?
Inspired me, Miss, because you told us that you went back to college, university, at the age of 59.
Yeah.
60. So I'm motivated.
Do it. All the young kids were wonderful. The young people were fabulous. They even invited me to party. I had invitations to parties, and they love to talk about things and world affairs. I got to know the son of the fellow who runs the Mormon church in this area, and his son was in one of the same classes I was in. And he was an apostate from the Mormon church because he turned against him, and he was disfellowshipped from the Mormon church. So we had a lot to talk about. And so it was such an adventure, and I'm so glad I did it.
Last weekend, Rick Farron, you did those questions at the end about the duck and that nobody got the questions, and then you asked, did you not say that the Proclaimer's book was a book that people didn't get until they were a member for so many years? Am I getting that? Am I remembering that right?
Yes. As a matter of fact, when they released the Proclaimer's book, I was living in Florida at the time. I would have to say it was probably around, I'm just going to take a shot at it, probably 1982, 83. Barbara, what do you think?
Oh, it was released 94.
94, okay. So I remember going to the convention in 94, and they said that you could get a Proclaimer's book if you were in the organization for 20 years. That was the criteria. Did you know that, Barbara?
Well, I found it out. I was out of Bethel 2 years, a year and a half when that came out.
Well, I can remember where I was. I was in St. Petersburg, Florida, the Bayfront Center, and that's the announcement that was made. And what really...
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, so I remember when that book was released. It was, as Barbara said, in 1994, but it was also allowed for pioneers, because I was a pioneer at the time. And so persons who were in the organization for a length of time, as well as pioneers who have already attended pioneer school, they were the ones that were allowed that book.
Oh, my goodness. This is Grow Faith, by the way. The one you just heard speak. This is Grow Faith. Yes.
Yeah, not everyone could get that book, and it really ticked my former wife off. I mean, she was an anointed witness, and they said that you had to be, the woman that just called in, I believe that was Robin, you had to be a pioneer, or you had to be in the organization for 20 years. And, it really ticked my former wife off. She went ballistic on me. She says, Rick, I want the book. So I went down, I talked to the the people that were giving the books out. I said, look at my wife. She's an anointed witness. I mean, isn't that enough to get the book? So I coerced him to give her the book. So we got the book. Yeah.
That's funny. They just must have been short books. That's all. Then a few years later, wasn't that many years, they discredited their own book by coming out with was it a DVD or something they put out? And they said things in there that were contrary to what was in Proclaimers. Of course, I can't say that I wrote the Proclaimers. I didn't. I was a researcher on it. I worked on certain issues, and I answered questions that came up. I had to do the research on some things, but I didn't write chapters. I put together some things, but I didn't write it. So somebody recently tried to malign my name by saying I wrote that Barbara Anderson wrote that Lion Proclaimers book, you know. So I said, I didn't write it. But it has its place in the history, and there were many contributors to that book. So we don't call the book written by one person. It was compiled by one person, and there were could have been 50 or more people that were working on different time and different times of the organization, different people in the organization, and events. So
I think I was under that understanding that it was you. And I now realize it's because I've only heard about you and what you've contributed to the book. I haven't heard about anybody else. But that makes sense that your research and other people's research would put that book together. Yeah, that makes sense.
The only thing I take credit for, I was just fascinated when I got my copy, and I opened up the first page, and the second sentence was mine. I got credit. The author of that particular subject, that first chapter, he came to me and just asked me. He said, "I need such and such on this topic," and so he said, "Find me a good quote." I found him a great quote. I thought it was a great quote, and I gave it to him. But I didn't know where. I didn't even know he was assigned the first chapter. Everything like that is just secretive. So when I opened it, I said, "What do you know? There's my quote." I opened the book with it. It was not. I don't consider myself a genius for doing that. So just chance and circumstance.
So thank you for talking with me. And was that your niece that promoted that book?
Robin. Yeah.
I'm glad you read.
Hey, Pastor Babe, let me say this. I mean, you've got a show coming up tonight. Why don't you give your show a plug here on the 6 Screens?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I do a show tonight. It's usually after what goes on with 6 Screens. I started at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on my channel, which is Apostle Babe Linda James. And basically, I'll have a few things, maybe the latest news in the JW world. And basically, let's talk about whatever comes up. Last weekend, I had Girl Face, who just spoke about being a pioneer and getting to have that book. You didn't have to wait 20 years, or you don't have to wait 20 years if you're a pioneer. You got interviewed last weekend, and I have, and it's a great interview. And I also have Pete from XJW Curious on the first Saturdays of the month. And he always brings a really good flavor. But yeah, people can participate and join me, and they don't have to show their face. When they join me, they can be anonymous. You can give whatever name you want, you know. And I love the conversations that happen in the chat. So yeah, 9 p.m. on Saturday night. Let's talk.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's Pacific time. Well, thank
you. Nice to meet you, Linda James.
Yeah, she's a wonderful woman. In fact, Linda, I'll be in touch with you. I'm still planning on you getting up here to the convention. I'm going to help you with that. I told you that, right? So I'll be in touch with you. I got some things I have you working on. All right, well, let's do this. Barbara, why don't we do this? Let's, and Joe is waiting there patiently.
Yeah.
Everyone is listening. Everyone wants to listen in to Joe's resignation letter. So why don't we do that now, and then we'll get into some of these sound files that you never heard before. Yeah. Okay?
I'm going to start off first. Okay? I'm going to introduce my husband, Joe Anderson, and we've had a rich life as a witness. He was very kind, and he was an elder the whole time that I left the organization. For 4 years, he was supportive of me but he was an active elder and witness, and he didn't really doubt the organization as an elder. He worked very diligently, like he always has all the many years that he was an elder. So, but he was nosy, and he was always interested in what new things that I had to say, some of my research. And the last year, before he wrote that letter, he didn't tell me that he was really mentally out of the organization. He stayed behind the scenes, and he had a good relationship with the other elders, and they respected him highly for his work all the many years as a JW. So, but he was taking in what was going on, because I had been on Dateline while he was an elder, and he wrote his resignation letter on a yellow pad. He sat in the dining room one day, and he was writing out a resignation letter. I had nothing to do with it. He sat there, and I did type it up, because after years of being in the building and plumbing business, he lost his skills on the typewriter as much as he needed to do the letter. So I just typed it up, and I was amazed reading it for the first time. Now that was June of 2002 that he sent that. That's the date on his resignation letter. We were with the Manchester Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses in Manchester, Tennessee, and he sent it to the officials. Many of them that he sent it to, he knew them personally in Brooklyn, because he was at Bethel twice when he was young, and then when he was in his mid-years. So he had, I think, 14 years altogether at headquarters. He also sent the resignations letter to Dan Sidlick, who is a personal friend of ours, and to Jack Barr, who also was a friend. And of course, both of those were members of governing body who are now deceased. Every elder in the home congregation in Manchester received a copy of the letter, and he sent one to the family head of the families in the congregation. So, you know, if it was a woman who had kids and her husband was an associate or something, she would get a copy. So approximately 8 weeks later, Joe was disfellowshipped by the Jehovah's Witnesses leaders, who used his letter as a basis to do so. So he used his letter to disfellowship him on. That's freedom, right? So from then on, this man I've been married to for 65 years, who has been an exemplary Christian. I got to say that. He's not making, he's not twisting my arm, who ministered to the flock for 42 years. He's been shunned since then by his son, our daughter-in-law, their children, and all the other Jehovah's Witnesses that were part of his life, because he was disfellowshipped for putting down his thoughts regarding the issues of the day back then. What did Joe say in the resignation letter that was so injurious and so evil that would cause such extreme action taken by the leaders of the organization? Well, you're going to hear for yourself and decide whether shunning Joe Anderson is and was justified. As one of the major reasons that I'm bringing this to your attention is because in the past, when we put this on our website a number of years after he wrote it, I had my website in 2000, started in 2007. And he wrote the letter 2002. It was after Dateline. Dateline was May 28th, 2002. And so he's going to read it. And somebody else told me that this should be done. I'd forgotten about it, but someone else encouraged me, said that this is people should hear it, and because Joe covers all of the bases. So I'm going to turn this over to him as he shares it with you.
Hello. Here we go.
Look, get yourself in the middle of the screen here.
Okay.
Okay. Look at you. There
Yeah.
you are. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
This letter pertains to my wish to no longer. This is a letter now to the Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, and that's here in
It was in Brooklyn, wasn't it? Then.
no,
Yeah.
here was this fellowship.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But you sent it off to the service department. I remember that.
right. We sent the letter off to them, and it says that this letter pertains to my wish to no longer serve as an elder in the Manchester, Tennessee congregation. That's knowing what I do about our organization's child molestation problem and other matters here in the Manchester congregation, I find it difficult to keep serving as an elder. Undoubtedly, how we as elders handle allegations of molestation in our organization has troubled me for quite some time. I was pleased to note from J.R. Brown's February 7th, 2002 letter to Dateline NBC that our organization would hear views and opinions from individuals within the framework of the congregation. So I take this time to ask that you resolve some of my differences of opinion according to scriptural principles. Since I have been in close proximity to the child molestation issue because of my wife, Barbara, I've come to know hundreds of molestation cases mismanaged by elders. Without a doubt, many elders are incapable of correctly dealing with molestation allegations, but others followed verbal and written directions from headquarters that cause immeasurable sorrow and lifelong unhappiness to the victim and their families. Almost every day for the last several years, I've read accounts sent to my wife from victims describing their disagreeable encounters with elders and the society, which in effect has punished them and protected their molesters. I know that Jehovah's Witnesses as a whole, plus those outside of our organization, say that they hate child molesters even more than murderers. But whether they really do or not is shown by their feelings and actions. Inasmuch as child molestation is an act done in secret, and since we as the elders of the society compound this by keeping such acts committed within our group a secret, the witnesses are under the illusion that our organization doesn't have a problem with molestation. Of course, each elder knows if there are any accused or confessed molesters within the congregation, his congregation. But elders don't know if there are molesters in other congregations. Consequently, because elders are unable to gauge the scope of this situation because of the secrecy, most think it isn't a problem. Now, due to media coverage of many distressing cases of a molestation within our organization, many elders are very disturbed. Without question, I'm sure that you are also. Here's one example of why keeping molestation a secret from the congregation does not work. I'm personally acquainted with a woman who was divorced, and when her little girl was molested, she went straight to the elders. They did not report the accused to the police, although Tennessee requires ministers to report child abuse. It took a sister in the congregation who found out about the rape years later to go to the police. This resulted in the molester being sentenced to 8 years in prison. As far as I know, this man was previously accused of molesting 3 girls in another state, and when he moved to Tennessee. The elders were notified of his past, yet they warned no one in the congregation as per the society's instructions. Before he was arrested, he molested 2 girls in Tennessee. So who was right? The sister who reported him, or the others who kept the secret? In our congregation, one elder told the other elders that if anyone molested his child, he would call the police first and elders later. Are you aware of how many elders feel this way? I personally know many elders feel that they really can do nothing to help in these cases. Yet you instruct that an accusation of molestation within the congregation is reported first to the elders. The October 8, 1993 Awake states that child molesters want something else from their victims: silence. Are we not sharers in guilt with the molesters when we don't encourage victims to go to the authorities where they will get help? Wouldn't this be the Christian thing to do? Are we not sharers in guilt with a molester who silences the victim with threats when we silence members in the congregation with threats if they warn others? In the May 24, 2002 letter to all the congregations in the United States, you stated that even one abused child is one too many. This same letter says, at least since 1981, articles have been published in our journals with a view to educating Jehovah's people on the need to protect children from child abuse. How can you educate Jehovah's people by keeping such secrets? To be able to protect their children, Jehovah's Witnesses have a right to know as part of the education if there are any people within the congregation accused of molestation. Incidentally, it seems to me that if concerned people had not gone to the media about the child abuse problem in our organization, this subject would not have been addressed as the elders' school year last year. It was obvious that there was a change of attitude by the statement made this child abuse is a crime. Now elders no longer treat molestation as a sin like adultery or fornication, but as something far more serious, a crime. This was a welcome change. Recently, a woman who used to be a witness told me, after she read an article in our local newspaper about Jehovah's Witnesses and allegations of child abuse, that she was molested by someone who attended the Manchester congregation many years ago. I've known her family for over 25 years and remember her as a young girl. The man who she accused is a very good friend of mine for over 30 years. If I go to my friend with another elder confronting him and he denies the allegation, I'm in a dilemma because I want him not to be guilty. How can I provide justice when I'm partial? Of course, I could remove myself from the situation, but why should we even be put in a position to judge our brothers in such matters where it takes the wisdom of Solomon to sort it out? According to the October 8, 1993 Awake, it is improbable that a child who accuses a person of molestation is lying. However, I believe it is better to err in behalf of a child than the accused. But the question arises, why are we as elders even investigating this crime of child abuse? Can we as elders really identify a person who is a molester when an accusation is made? Of course, something has to be done when accusations are made but can't be proved. But most witnesses want to leave the situations like this in Jehovah's hands. To me, this is shifting responsibility. Our organization has guides to settle disputes and discover truth. But in the above case, if the accused denied the allegation, the investigation is over until someone else comes forward accusing the same person, something that happens infrequently. Since elders have been told that molestation is a crime, why can't our brothers go first to the authorities with an accusation and then inform the elders? We expect our brothers to go first to the authorities with an accusation of murder. Moreover, it is inconceivable to think elders would investigate an allegation of murder to determine guilt or innocence. So why would we investigate an allegation of child abuse to determine guilt or innocence? This is just not our field of expertise. We are ministers of God, not police. The authorities and their child abuse experts sometimes make mistakes, but nothing like the mistake of just asking the accused, "Did you do it?" And the reply is no. If there is not another witness to the act, consequently, all charges are dropped. This matter is closed. The victim is warned not to talk about it or else. It brings me to the subject of victims having to provide another witness to his or her molestation. There are contradictions associated with this rule. In the past, Watchtower literature stated that 2 witnesses to each act must be provided before judicial action could be taken. Now there's something new. 2 persons as witnesses to separate incidents of the same kind of wrongdoing can be deemed sufficient to take action. Which is it? Also, just what kind of action is to be taken? Judicial action which could lead to disfellowshipping, or investigate actions leading to the determination of guilt and then reporting the allegation to the authorities? If our teachings mean we must meet the above criteria before we report to the authorities, as many elders think we do, I say no. We shouldn't invoke the 2-witness rule when it comes to whether elders should report an accusation to authorities. In fact, let me reiterate, I believe the elders should not be investigating an accusation of child abuse before the authorities are called in. The flock is told that elders are loving, kind, and sensitive. Yet time and again, I have heard of extremely ignorant or worse behavior on the part of elders when involved in sexual abuse cases. For instance, a child in our circuit accused the grandfather of molestation. Her mother went to the police and the man, a brother, admitted his guilt. I was told that the case was handled satisfactorily by all concerned, except when the mother was approached by the presiding overseer of the congregation, and he said, "If it's any consolation to you, your daughter enjoyed the act." The mother left the organization because she couldn't handle the idea that this man was her spiritual shepherd. Another case comes to mind. A sister told of being molested when she was 8 years old. The man confessed, but one of the elders asked her then, "What kind of clothes were you wearing?" She was advised to make peace with the perpetrator, and her family was counseled to invite him over for a meal. It's obvious that a question and advice like this proves that elders are not qualified and shouldn't be involved. If I know of hundreds of cases like these, you must know of thousands. Children and women are very vulnerable in this male-dominated world, and this is true also in our organization. I have quoted James 1:27 many, many times, and have heard it quoted from the platform an equal number of times. Of course, you well know the scripture where James said, "The form of worship that is clean and undefiled from the standpoint of our God and our Father is this, to look after orphans and widows in their tribulation, to keep oneself without spot from the world." Generally, we emphasize the end of the scripture and rarely analyze the situation orphans, widows found themselves in when the husband and father died. Primarily, they were without a protector, which made them extremely vulnerable. Although the situation has changed somewhat today, there still are many areas where orphans and widows need help, and elders should give special care to their needs. And especially is this so with regard to those who are sexually abused. Who are their protectors? if not those who can be like in spiritual fathers, the elders. God puts them under our care and yours too. Whatever it takes, we should go the extra mile to help abused ones. However, it appears that our organization will sacrifice a child to keep the person who denies an allegation of molestation. In your letter to all bodies of elders, February 15th, 2002, you instruct us to never suggest to anyone that they should not report an allegation of child abuse to the police or other authorities. Why should elders be put in a position to suggest or not to suggest reporting an allegation? The victim or caregivers and the rest of Jehovah's Witnesses should be informed by elders to always call the police if a crime has occurred. No buts or ifs about it. Also, in this same February 15, 2002 letter, you say, if you are asked, make it clear that whether to report the matter to the authorities or not is a personal decision for each individual to make. This is accurate information and legal in 17 states. If these 17 reporting states, everybody is obligated to report even suspicion of child abuse. In Tennessee, this has been the law since 1972. In Kentucky, the law is the same. And why would Kentucky resident Bill Bowen, as seen on Dateline, be told by someone in the legal department at Bethel to not report a case of molestation? What is the society's legal department doing, giving us wrong information such as the above? In the January 1st, 1997 Watchtower, a policy statement is found that a man known to have been a molester cannot hold a position of authority within the congregation. This policy is certainly appreciated and shows your concern for protecting the flock. However, the word known appears to be a confusing problem. Who is he known to? The elders in the determination of his guilt are innocent in their hands? What if the victim can't prove to the elders that she was molested because of being unable to produce another witness to the act? Does not this mean the accused remains in his position? I believe this is so because he is then known or considered by the elders to be not guilty. He is even then not known to be a molester. Elders should never be given the power to determine who is to be known a molester or not, because they are untrained and unqualified. This policy puts children in the congregation at risk and should be reevaluated. In your statement in the May 24th, 2002 letter to all congregation, you say, we have long instructed elders to report allegations of child abuse to the authorities, and it's in black here. It says where it is required by law to do so. Where God is concerned, if this is a crime, it's a crime everywhere. If wrong in one state, why not in others? Also, if it's wrong, we should do the right thing, whether the laws of the land require it or not. Aren't we supposed to be morally better than the world? Do we not go an extra step or two because of conscience? Another point taken from the same statement as quoted above is this. You say we have long instructed elders to report allegations of child abuse to the authorities. Where is it written as policy that elders are instructed to report allegations of child abuse to the authorities? Your statement, as quoted above, is a half-truth and misleads the reader. What is not understood is that elders have written instructions to call the legal department, where they will be told that if their state requires a minister to report the allegation, they should report it. That's a far different matter than long instructed elders to report allegations of child abuse to the authorities. Another point I want to discuss with you is the recent disfellowshipping of my wife, Barbara. The scriptures used for disfellowshipping her are found in 1 Corinthians 5, 1 through 12. The letter from Larry Seeley, the presiding overseer of the Manchester congregation, said that Barbara was disfellowshipped for causing division, not for committing any of the wicked acts Paul described in 1 Corinthians 5, 1 through 2, gross wickedness, sexual immorality, and so forth. It was the society spokesman, J.R. Brown, who accused my wife of committing some unspecified spiritual violations or sins for which she was being called before a judicial committee. This most certainly blemished my wife's character before the whole world, especially since no proof was offered then or ever. It was the Watchtower Society that forced Barbara to go to the media about the judicial hearing convened by the local congregation at orders of the Watchtower's legal department. It is obvious that because she went to the media about the sexual abuse issue, that she caused division among the flock. Why didn't J.R. Brown just say so instead of accusing her of sins and blacken her character? It was because headquarters knew there was absolutely no proof she caused divisions by propagating her views about child abuse before she went to the media. If Barbara was disfellowshipped because of causing divisions, the Apostle Paul should have been disfellowshipped for causing division among the flock because he publicized sensational sexual immorality in the Christian congregation. Not only did he discuss with the Corinthian congregation how he felt about the congregation, hiding fornication in their midst, he recorded his accusation for millions of people to read in the Bible during the past 2,000 years. Why is it okay for Paul to have gone public revealing disgraceful conduct that was being condoned in the congregation? But when my wife goes public about the organization condoning and protecting immoral people by the bad policies, she is punished. Moreover, wicked and immoral acts have been, let's see, what is it? Is it, have I got 2 pages?
Yeah.
Just a moment. There you go. Is that it? Mm-hmm. Is that 5? Okay. Let me read the last sentence here. Moreover, wicked and immoral acts have been equated to her by applying 1 Corinthians 5 as the reason for her disfellowshipping. I believe this to be unchristian. I also believe that disfellowshipping my wife violated the Apostle Paul's command to each one of us to work to keep the congregation clean no matter what the cost. Furthermore, disfellowshipping her for causing divisions because she publicly spoke out about uncleanness in our organization is a violation of the freedom of speech Christ brought us. Inasmuch as I cannot be guided by your policies on child molestation, it is difficult for me to remain an elder. I'm not expecting a response to this letter. If any changes in your policies occur, I'm sure they will appear in publications. Thank you for considering the letter, and I hope nothing less than the Christian thing will be done in behalf of the victims and those speaking out. Sincerely, A.J. Anderson. Huh?
So you were disfellowshipped over this, huh?
Yes.
Were you surprised?
No. That was the only thing they could do because of that's what they were supposed to do. They did what the Watchtower said. And that's the scriptures they used to prove it. It didn't really prove anything, but this is what the Watchtower wanted to do. They might have had concern for people that are put in this situation, that children that are molested, but they have to follow the society's guidelines. The elders have to follow the society's guidelines. And that's what we read there. This was the society's guidelines on what to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like the letter. And I didn't shun you.
Did everybody fall asleep?
No, nobody fell asleep, Joe. As a matter of fact, we got more people coming in.
Oh,
I've been noticing the count here. The count has been going up since you've been talking. Well, thank you, Joe. That was wonderful. People really enjoyed that.
well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, I mean that. That really was. I mean, what I do at the Six Screens Network, I can see people coming in and it increased. They really found your letter of disassociation very, very informative. Thank you, Joe, for sharing that with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
So if the society had those in the service department, which is headed by Ted Jarris, if they would have called Joe to Bethel, or myself and Joe, and we could have sat and discussed this. After all, they weren't strangers to us. We knew practically everybody in the service
I
department.
had been there before.
And Joe had been with Bethel before, so he had 2 runs at the thing. They really knew him. Never caused a bit of problems.
I left Bethel to marry her, and look at all the problems I got.
Yeah.
Joe, I heard you say once before that you and Barbara had only one fight. It's still going on.
That's with the Watchtower too. Oh,
we don't change.
That was good, very good.
Mm-hmm. But so here, this was 22 years ago. Look what they have been through. Look at the lawsuits. Look at what they had to learn the hard way. They could have learned from this. They could have taken it under consideration, but they punished him. It didn't make any difference in our life. It didn't cause any horror to our existence. It was just that all the years it took them to straighten up, and they've still got problems. One of the last cases I heard of is just a matter of, which is the person is suing the organization over it. It was just 4 years old. And this always trying to get around the policies. That's the way it is in this. They say one thing and then they explain it a different way, as Joe showed here. And all of this could have been avoided. So many people who are criminals could have been put in their place by not acknowledging their repentance, and the victims could have gone to the police. So that's the reason for reading this, to show it took them so long. And look at just recently, one of the lawyers was sanctioned for lying to the judge in a case of child abuse. So what a waste of time that they didn't acknowledge it and handle right. I thought in 1997, when they came out with that letter regarding child abuse, all cases would be turned over to the legal department and known molesters wouldn't be appointed. I thought that was going to end the way they handled it. I mean, you can't in reality stop all molestation, but you can stop the same person who's a molester from molesting the second one by doing what is right. And they didn't do this. So these men and women went on to molest more. And consequently, the organization got a reputation across North America, so told the detective, for harboring pedophiles who knew what they could get away with. So I hope that reviewing this and seeing the results of this to punish Joe, it shows us all this organization has not even one iota of Holy Spirit if Holy Spirit works that way. I haven't gotten into that, but y'all know what I mean. Okay, Rick.
Yeah, well, good. Thank you, Joe, for bringing that up. So Barbara, why don't you want to play one of your tapes here tonight? Some of your so-called sound files that people never heard before. I think they might find that kind of fascinating.
What you got? Have you got? How about Covington's? Do you have that one on hand, right?
That's what I got here. Let me just get in here and check my my downloads. I download a lot up, so let's see what we do have here. Let's see what we do have for downloads. So I got Covington Rutherford Burial.
Yeah.
All right. Well, why don't we play that now? Why don't you explain to the audience what this is a little bit about, so they can kind of be getting a little clue to what's happening here.
Well, Covington, as the chief lawyer,
he wanted to be buried out at well, he had no desire to be buried any place, but he.
Okay. So let me roll that back.
It's a long interview that Covington had, but it was all witnesses. I mean, this was nothing to do with ex-witnesses. This part of this long interview, I have it on a cassette, but this part of it on Rutherford's burial was separated, and it was actually put on MP3, for the internet, and because there was so much contention over where was Rutherford buried. So the question was asked during this interview of Covington, tell us, where was he buried? And you'll hear Covington's voice. Now, he was a very well-known and effective attorney. And he has a sense of humor too. So he's making a joke to start with. He's making a little humorous remark to start with about the answer on Rutherford's where he was buried.
Yeah, let me just get something settled here. Just want to make sure we got this right. Now, that is a long tape, but what we'll do here, let me just get in here for a second, Barbara. Hold on 1 second, and I'll make sure I got the right sound files up, because I got 5 or 6 different computers going here, so I want to make sure I get the right route up.
We can barely hear you, Rick. I don't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that might be better. Okay. So anyway, let me just make sure I get the right clips up here for us. Okay. I just want to make sure that let me just play. I'm going to play this and see if you can hear it. If you can't, we're going to have to go over to my other screen here. But see if you can't. Just play it for a second and see if you can hear this coming through. Okay. Hold on 1 second. All right. Let's play it right now.
Did he want to be buried out at San Diego? Well, he had no desire to be buried any place, but he.
Could you hear that, Barbara?
Yes. Now he's talking to an audience.
All right. Well, let's keep it up then. I just want to make sure people can hear it. So we won't play the whole thing because it's
it's short. It's only 6 minutes, 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, we'll play the whole thing. Okay. So yeah, let's do that. So let's play the whole thing right now. I just want to make sure people can hear it, so we can hear that clip pretty good so far, right?
Yeah, it was real loud, and it almost was too loud. But go ahead.
I'll tune it down a little bit. Let's play it right now.
Did he want to be buried out at San Diego? Well, he had no desire to be buried any place, but he. The thing was, he knew he was dying and had to be buried, and he was sensible enough to know that he didn't want to have his bones hauled all the way back. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he suggested that when the time comes for us to bury him, he wanted to be buried.
It's not long.
And we tried to get him buried on the Beth Shan property, and there was a big property in behind there. It went all the way down to Montezuma Road, and then Brother Heath had that big house over across the way that his mother had given him money to build. A great big house, very. Thing cost about $500,000 to build and duplicate now, or more. So we then tried to get him buried there at that property, and they turned us down. The board there in San Diego, they wouldn't lie. They didn't want him buried anywhere. It was so much hostility and hatred against the judge. And the authorities just turned us down every turn we took. And I filed a lawsuit then in the courts out there in San Diego, down in San Diego, for a man that they call a writ of mandate to force them to let us bury him out there on that property someplace. And Judge Mundo was the judge of the Superior Court that heard it. Why, then he passed the buck, and jumped from one thing to the other and one technicality. And finally, after looking at the matter in a reasonable way, we all, that is Bill and Bonnie and Nathan and all of us, decided, well, we have fought enough on this. And it looks like it's the Lord's will that we take his body back to Brooklyn and have him buried in Staten Island. Not back to Brooklyn, but back to, how they, Bill and Bonnie went on the train with his body. And Fred and Nathan and I had already come back and were working. I was trying to get his bones under the ground by legal mandate, and we couldn't get it. So there was just no other thing to do except take it, and we did, and that ended that. He was laughing down from heaven while we were trying to get his bones buried. He was probably asleep. I decided to let it go. Let her go. Didn't I ever teach them boys anything, Yeah. He probably couldn't see how that was connected with him. Of course, you love the man, see. Oh, my, yeah. And that's why it was important to. Well, we wanted to do his will as best we could, not his will, but Jehovah's will, and he had to be buried someplace. Yeah. And it wasn't reasonable to haul his body all the way across the country. And we finally had to do that, though. That was the bad part of it, you see.
How long did it take by train to go from?
Well, it took about 3 days, yeah. 3 days. 2.5 days from San Diego. And I made that trip a lot of times. From New York to San Diego, sure. It takes 2.5 days.
That's very nice.
Yeah. On the Pullman, of course, we rode Pullman. We went first class. Brother Rutherford told me, he said, I don't want you, whenever you travel, I want you to travel first class. So, and Brother Heath did, and Nathan did too. All of us did. Freddie.
Yeah, because you needed your rest.
Well, not only that, it's not our comfort, but we were entitled to the laborers worthy of his time.
Well, that was it, Barbara. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating. That's fascinating. That was Covington. Where'd you get that tape?
Say what?
Where'd you get that tape? That was covered. That was something else.
Somebody sent that to me already, part of a file that I could listen to on the internet. But I do have the whole interview on a cassette tape, and I've had it for years, where they go from one subject to another. I just have to locate it. I know it's here somewhere in my office, and I have to locate it. And I should probably have it. I never thought about it all these years, and I should have it converted and put on.
Yeah, well, just to reiterate here, there's been a lot of controversy around Rutherford and where he was buried.
Yeah.
We've heard so many different things. I remember years ago when Richard Rowie had his program here on the 6 screens. Richard was kind of really suggesting that Beth Shan, now that was out in California, that was a bomb shelter Watchtower built, and Richard was kind of really assured that Rutherford was buried under the concrete in the garage at Beth Shan. But you have different feelings on that, and Covington is kind of suggesting different thoughts too. Yeah.
When I was visiting in '94 in California, because I was working on a writing project after I left Bethel, and it was nothing to do with the organization. I worked for Knowledge Adventure Company, and anyway, we did children's adventures with mine was on Bug Adventure. Anyway, just I'm throwing that in. So I had to go out there, pick out the graphics for Bug Adventure. It's for the computer for children, and so it was they wouldn't give the address of where Rutherford's mansion was. No, everybody was told not to give the address because the people who live on that street said that people were coming up and down. It's a dead end constantly to see that house that Rutherford had. Well, when I was, I talked to a prominent elder in the area, and he gave me the address. So I went with two other from Burbank, two couples from Burbank. The husbands were elders and their wives, and the five of us went there to San Diego. So one of the men went up to the house, and there was a group of men, not a lot, maybe 4 or 5 men in a big garage, and the garage doors were open. You had to go up a little hill, walk up a concrete paved driveway, and this huge garage, and the doors were open. There was these men, and they had motorcycles, and they were talking. So this elder went up there, and he introduced himself, and so the one man came forward. He said, "I own the house," and this was a Chinese man that bought the house. And during the conversation, this idea about Rutherford's body, where was it? It was supposed to be buried. Rutherford wanted it buried on the property, and the property is hilly, and so you go behind the house, and then you go down a hill, and then there's a valley. At one point, there wasn't anything. It was a valley and nothing, and it goes up a hill. But in our time, somewhere along the line, they put a parkway through there. So there was a pump house in the back of the property on the side of the hill, and that's where Rutherford thought that his body should be buried. But the San Diego city fathers wouldn't permit it, and so there was all this argument. So anyway, the elder from Burbank, who was talking to the Chinese man, he mentioned about me, and I was a researcher on the Watchtower history book, and would he give permission to show us the house, inside of the house? And the man said, "Sure, absolutely." And then it came up. By that time, the other part of the group, the 4 of us joined the 5th person, and we were standing here in the garage with him talking, and then it came up about the body, and the Chinese man said, "You're standing on him." And we said, "What?" He said, "No, you're standing on him. This is the honest truth." He said his body was buried in the garage, and they put this concrete over him. They didn't take the body back to New York. Well, in this short tape, you could hear Covington, and he sounds so serious. Why should he be lying about this? And he took him back. They took the body back to New York, and there was a a place that in near Brooklyn, I think Staten Island, somewhere right in there, there was a number of Watchtower officials buried on that a piece of property there near WBBR, I think. I can't remember anymore. And that's where the body was supposed to be buried. But there have been rumors that, for instance, Beth Shan was built, when you say as a bunker or bomb shelter, well, it had a bomb shelter, but it really wasn't built just for a bomb shelter. It did have a tunnel underneath that, absolutely. But it was the home. It was actually the home of Rutherford's chauffeur. And boy, his name is subject, but he was very, very, very important in the moneyed world of the Watchtower. He just drove Rutherford around, but he was very, very wealthy. His family were extremely wealthy, and his name won't come to my head. Maybe somebody will remember it. So there's a book out that came out, maybe 15 years ago on Beth Shan. Well, at Bethel, when we were at Bethel, they did a thing on Beth Shan for family night, and was interesting to us that most everybody, including the officials at Bethel, had never heard of Beth Shan until an old Bethelite came forward with actually an old short movie, and it had Beth Shan in it. It was a home movie, and the owners, it showed the owner of Beth Shan, who was the father of the so-called chauffeur, walking with Rutherford on the grounds. And it was amazing when the two people that were emceeing the family night that night, that, I had one every 6 months at Bethel Family Night, and entertainment for the Bethel family by Bethelites. So the statement was made that nobody knew about Beth Shan. So as the years pass, the organization, they just lost facts until they just popped up. And that's what happened when we started doing even the Proclaimers book. There were so many things that came up about the organization that the present day officials of the Watchtower had no idea about. And so it's still that way. I still do some things and find that it's not common knowledge about this or that in Russell's day. The years have taken a toll on historical information on this organization, but the primary stuff is out there, that's for sure. And so the research that is out there is believable. I know it's believable. So, but that's the background of Beth Shan. And if you can get your hands on the book, while you're showing maybe another little interview, I'll get the book and I'll show everybody, and you can order one of these about Beth Shan. And it's something fun to read, I'll tell you. So we have three or four tapes, and they aren't that long, and it's Alan Farbacher, and he is actually talking in one tape to Jairus on the telephone, and Alan recorded it. And then we have him talking to Mario Marino, who was an attorney at Bethel, and Alan recorded that one. Don Adams, the president of the Watchtower, Pennsylvania, that one is recorded. It's 8 minutes.
Which one would you like to play first? We have Farbacher and Marino.
Yeah.
Which one would you like first?
Okay.
Farbacher and Wallen.
You could do that now. That's 20 minutes.
Farbacher and Don Adams. We won't be able to play them all because we're coming up on the news here, but
Yeah,
we got about 20 minutes or so to go. So
okay, let's let's do Mario Marino. That's 14 minutes.
All right, let's go Marino. Okay, let's do that right now. Let's listen in. So give us a little rundown here. Tell us who Fulbacker is and who Marino is.
Okay, I sent you a picture of me and Fulbacker. Did you get it this late this evening?
Yeah. Let me get the picture up right now. Hold on 1 second. Let me put the picture up right now.
It's a 15-year-old picture of Alan Fulbacker and myself, and Alan is deceased, but he was like my brother for all the many years. When he left the organization, he really exposed the Watchtower. On my website now, we have a whole section to his writings. There's one that's almost 70 pages. That was the final one that he did before he died. It's a letter to the governing body. Alan Fulbacker graduated from MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He was a forerunner and designer of what we have presently is a cell phone. That is his background. Years and years ago, this is a genius. And then he started doing research because he was interested. When he was at MIT, he was writing an article, something to do with the witnesses. It was a progressive article, and it was good. It wasn't critical, and he started doing research, and he started finding out how they lied in the articles, how they misrepresented statements that they quoted or they partially quoted. And that's when he began to suspect there was more to this. His father was a Bethelite for many years in the 1940s, and he married a local woman, and he had 2 sons, and so Alan was the oldest one. So 1954, when I became a witness, Alan was 4 years old. So we knew him all the time that we were witnesses, and then Alan left the organization, I don't know, probably in the late 70s, early 80s. And he was with Ray Franz, Peter Gregerson, and all those major figures who were critical of the organization, the apostate organization that Bethel hated. And Alan was one of those people that turned on the organization and published negatives, but it was mostly doctrine. And I was really the first one to come along with accusations and revelations on breaking the law. So anyway, that's part of the history. So Alan, in 2001, I was before Dateline, he called Bob Wallen. Bob Wallen was the head over the home committees. Joe knew him from the 50s. He stayed at Bethel, married, and he was Jairus's personal assistant. Very powerful man. So Alan called Bob Wallen, and that's a 20-minute discussion. As I said, this is before Dateline. So Alan doesn't let on. He knows that we did Dateline. It wasn't released. We did it in the beginning of 2001, and then it wasn't released until May of 2004. So at Bethel, they had no idea any of this was coming. Don Adams' interview with Alan is 8 minutes. Mario Marino, the lawyer, is 14 minutes. Jairus's is 4.
We'll go forward. We'll go forward and play that one right now, Barbara. I'm trying to get the picture. For some reason, the picture won't come up. If I can get it up, I'll play it at the end. So let's get in there right now, and let's take a look at what we're going to be playing here. Give me 1 second. So the one we want is Fulbacker and Marino, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's play that right now. You'll hear it.
Your input is invalid. It's 8:51 a.m. where you're calling.
Good morning, witnesses.
Hello, could you connect me with the office of Philip Brumley, please?
He's a lawyer, head of the legal department.
Hello, could you connect me with Philip Brumley's office, please?
One moment, please.
Legal department, how may I direct your call?
May I speak to Brother Brumley, please?
Hold on, please.
Yeah.
Hello?
Hello, Philip Bromley's office. May I ask who's calling?
Yes, my name is Alan Feuerbacher. I'm calling on the recommendation of Brother Bob Wallen.
Okay. He's on another phone, but let me see if I can connect you with his associate. Hold on just a minute.
Okay.
Does he actually talk to us?
Marito, yeah.
And this is Mario Moreno. May I help you?
Yes, my name is Alan Feuerbacher. I was just on the phone with Brother Bob Wallen in Brooklyn.
Brother Wallen.
Yes, and he suggested that I express my concerns to Philip Brumley. And
Philip's unavailable, so they asked me. Philip is our general counsel. I'm one of the associate general counsels here
okay,
at headquarters.
all right. Would it be appropriate to tell you?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Well, I expressed concerns to Brother Wallen about some things that are marginally related to the recent World Trade Center disaster, and how that will affect the perception of Jehovah's Witnesses in the community. I guess I could just kind of repeat what I had told Brother Wallen. The recent disaster there produced some pretty spectacular and heart-rending images, which we saw on television and we now see in Time Magazine, Newsweek, People Magazine, and wherever you want to look.
That's correct. Yeah.
Now the problem that I see for Jehovah's Witnesses is that some of the literature contains scenes of destruction and Armageddon that are some of which are eerily like those scenes. In particular, there's one from the brochure "Does God Really Care About Us?" That the background scene of a building on fire at night, essentially being consumed by fire, is eerily like a scene from Lower Manhattan that I saw on television the night of the disaster. And the thing that could be very disturbing to some people is...
That's the brochure you mentioned, right?
Yes.
Does God Really Care About Us? Okay.
Yeah. Do you have that in front of you? Or available? Oh.
Well, available, yeah, but not anywhere nearby.
Okay. The thing is that in the front of the brochure, in the front of that picture, there's a group of people who are very, very happy, smiling, and glad to be coming out of such destruction. And the caption says, "Soon at Armageddon, those who do not submit to God's rule will be cut off. Those who do submit will survive into a righteous new world." Now the thing is, I have come to know that certain people who are very much in opposition to Jehovah's Witnesses are beginning a campaign to compare these pictures like this in the literature to the scenes of destruction at the World Trade Center, and with the notion that look at these smiling people who are rejoicing over the destruction of 1 million times more people than died at the World Trade Center. What kind of people are these? Yeah, you get my drift on that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, people who know Jehovah's Witnesses, of course, know that such a comparison is well, ridiculous, and of course, it doesn't matter to people who are, strongly in opposition, because they want to, knock Jehovah's Witnesses down. But I'm a little worried about the community of Jehovah's Witnesses because of certain historical things. Well, another recent event was, I don't know if you've heard about it, but the so-called Reverend Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson recently made a public statement that the United States got what it deserved because it left God and was allowing homosexuals and abortionists and lesbians and you name it to take over. And this disaster was God's judgment. Well, of course, they were called on the carpet by the media for this, and just last week, Falwell basically had to admit that he had made a terrible error in judgment in stating such a thing, and so on. And at any rate, again, I'm sure you can see where I'm going with this. Another thing was that back in 1917, when the Brother Rutherford and others were jailed on sedition charges, the charges came at a time when the country was in a turmoil over, well, not a specific disaster, but of course World War I, and it came as a result of people using words found in the literature and misapplying them, but applying them still in a fairly logical way. I don't know if you ever read the old Finnish mystery book, and read exactly what was said, but it's interesting that it wasn't actually in that case the society itself that expressed an opinion about war and so forth that got it in trouble, but it simply quoted a local New York City pastor who was not a Bible student, and simply quoting him got them in trouble with the government.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, if you want the pages, I can look it up from the old Finnish mystery book. In fact, I have one sitting here, so it's let me make sure of it. Yeah. Okay.
Now
Pages 250 to 251.
You must be a brother, because you're.
Well, no, I'm an inactive witness. I've been inactive for about 20 years.
Okay.
But I have many people who are relatives who are still witnesses, and so I'm concerned, and I keep up with what's going on.
Okay.
And in any case, I think that that in view of the world situation at this time, I just wanted to express my concern that the witness community ought to be extremely aware that their preaching work and their way of life could be threatened by these sorts of comparisons of destruction in witness literature to the destruction of the World Trade Center, and the point being, of course, that these witnesses are rejoicing in destruction. Okay, now that's the argument that is going to be made. Okay, and I don't know what ought to be done about that, but
now, Alan, are you thinking that's a possibility, or there's actually, individuals who have said that have already made those kinds of statements?
Oh, I know for a fact that individuals have made those statements. There's activity on the internet where that's being done. I know that certain people have said that they were going to send such material to the FBI and just do what they can to stir the pot.
Gotcha.
Now, the thing that specifically, as I told Brother Wallen, that specifically got me worried on this is that I understand that after the business meeting, in a couple of weeks that there's going to be a special meeting the next day, and I didn't know what it was about until Brother Wallen told me a little bit about it. But the meeting itself was said to be secret. That people who were invited were not supposed to know what was going on, and so forth. And it makes me wonder if if there could be trouble from holding supposedly secret meetings so shortly after such a disaster as at the World Trade Center, in view of the pot stirring that some people are doing. So at any rate, that's my concern. So you've got it.
Okay. Well, Alan, I appreciate it, and I'll tell you what I will do with this information is I will pass it on to I'm thinking writing, because they're the kind of ones that produce the literature, the art department.
Mm-hmm.
Art department falls under writing, and it's all part of the writing department. So I'll pass it on to them. Just a thought, obviously just your phone call, I'll pass it on, but sometimes it's letters from the public, be surprised, they carry some weight. In other words, I'm going to pass it on, but it's kind of like, I think sometimes they wonder, am I making this up? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Well,
is this just Mario Moreno's little point of view, and he's trying to, or somebody, really making this point?
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? It just,
yeah, I know.
So for what it's worth, I just want you, obviously you're not required, but I want to encourage you to send your thoughts into what I would just say to the writing department, if you ever have a moment, to do it, because
okay.
You bring up some good points.
Okay.
In the meantime, I will verbally pass them on.
All right.
By an email or something.
All right.
One over there.
I made a few notes that I over the last week or two while I was thinking about this, and one other thing I wrote for myself was there was some material on an internet discussion board it's restricted to Jehovah's Witnesses only for the most part. At least they're the only ones who can actively participate. But some of the things that they wrote were rather upsetting to me. What some of them were well, there's only one way to put it. They were rejoicing about how exciting it is about the World Trade Center disaster in view of the fulfillment of prophecy and so on and so on. You can fill in the blanks yourself, but see, that's the kind of thing that where you have expressions from witnesses that that simply fall right into the hands of opposers.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, and
I haven't seen it, but I know the types of statements you're talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, frankly, I grew up as a witness. I was born in 1951, and so I like I said, I haven't been active for 20 years, but.
Well, there you go. That's Alan Krovacker talking to a lawyer at the Watchtower headquarters. Very interesting conversation. Boy, he's so calm and collected. Barbara, what do you think?
Yes, and many people would do things like this out of a big heart and call writing. I knew of writers personally who would get a call similar. Alan was doing this at not as a spy or anything. He was sincere about this. In fact, he called again and talked to Marino, and I have that tape where actually it was later, quite a bit later, and he mentions my name, and Marino kept talking. Whenever he'd mention me, he would call me Sister Anderson. He was very, very polite and very kind. Alan was making some points. He was not being a mean apostate. he was serious about this, because this was a situation that was legitimately happening because of the way that the Watchtower portrayed Armageddon in the literature, and how they were, in this kind of happy over everything because it was fulfilling prophecy. That isn't good for one's mental state, So he did have that. He had a big heart, and but as the years progressed, he became more and more a hard-hitting writer. On my website, there's a whole section of his writings. He pulled apart some of the major books that most of the listeners right now studied in the past 15, 20 years. He took apart the books that from page to page and showed how this was not accurate and that was not accurate. He really became a tremendous exposer of the kind of stuff the Watchtower is putting out. These writers, so many of them didn't know what the heck they were saying. And Philip Brumley was a part of people like that. Also, Gene Smalley was saying things in the Watchtower that were uncalled for, and people would complain. And then the governing body members, the three over the writing department, would hear about it. Then they would go to the office and sit down with people like Gene Smalley and say, "Don't you do that again. We don't want an article like that," or you didn't say it right. And now we have misunderstandings to deal with. So I just thought that people out there should know that there's a lot of the humans at Bethel are no different than humans anywhere else. And they aren't all mean and making decisions to hurt people. They're just people. And so many made statements that according to the way they viewed things. And this would then change slightly policy. And that's why you read in the magazine a little drift towards something else that you didn't have in a year before in a magazine. And just a very, very human organization that through their writings, they set themselves up almost like to be looked at as like gods. And there was nothing godlike about any of us in the writing department, or especially, I saw them just as people. And but the decisions that those people made at Bethel, they never realized how they would impact the lives of people outside who were living completely different lives than those in Bethel. You cannot think like a person outside with all the way you have to struggle to live, and compare that to Bethel. It's an institution. There's no comparison. So these people weren't saying things out of experience. It was like a dream. And so those articles or those brochures or those booklets with the big disasters on and the horror and everything, that's what Alan was trying to say. He said, it's harmful. So there are a number of the other ones. Jairus's is 45 minutes long. It's excellent. And if we can put that one on where he interviews Jairus. Jairus is a slime ball. I gotta tell you, he tries to manipulate Alan, and it's a very upfront discussion. It was August of 2001 that they had this discussion on the problems in the organization. So then we have I have one that I was interviewed at 30 minutes on the Mark Furman show. That was something else. First of all, they interviewed Linda John at Washington State, and then they interviewed me. And between us, It was an hour and 15 minutes. 15 minutes, and it was really hard hitting, accurate, and people should. It was 2007 that one was. Y'all need to hear some of these things, and because we were influencing people's lives by these interviews. Sometimes you had one where they just hang up on that one, so I didn't bother with that. So Carrie Lauterbach Wood, an attorney, she had a marvelous discussion with newsmen January of 2008, and it was 14 minutes. But she's an attorney, and she knows the blood doctrine inside and out, and she had written an actual booklet on the blood issue back in 2008, which the newspapers covered across the country. So I have that discussion, and she tells it like it is. She's kind. She doesn't stumble around like I do, but I'm not an attorney. And so she nails the society on the blood issues, common sense. And her own mother died because of the blood issue in a ridiculous. It was a ridiculous viewpoint at the time that actually caused her mother's death. And Carrie left the witnesses when she was 18 years old and went to law school. So we do have these. I was interviewed by BRCI, which is an ex-witness organization, in 2009. And that's an hour and 20 minutes of discussing the organization. And that one has to do with Europe. My travels in Europe, speaking at the Vatican, speaking at two huge Catholic churches, where questions and answers, where we have photos and press coverage throughout the country, the 5 countries we traveled in. There's been a lot of work, and I'm not glorifying anything that anybody has done, but unless you participate in all this, you don't realize how much work goes in, even to this day. The work that the former witnesses are doing in Australia, in Germany, Sweden, New Zealand, especially, and we had a good news from because ex-witnesses knew what they were doing. They knew how to handle the whole situation regarding the law and New Zealand's law, and on the issue of shunning and children and etc. So, if there are people that would like to hear these kind of things, then we'll play it.
Well, right now, Barbara, we won't have time to go into all of that. We're up on our JW World News.
Right.
We're going to have to make it another program. I hate to say it, but we will have to make another program. I want to play those tapes. I do have them up here, but we do have a number of other programs coming up here tonight. So why not in 2 weeks continue this subject? Or you think you're going to get that other woman on, or what?
I don't know about that in 2 weeks. I can schedule this. I have a very interesting man also too, but we have the dates open for people, so we can do what we want to be. If your suggestion is to continue it, because you already have it on some of this in your already programmed, maybe we can continue. So let's see.
Yeah, well, it's very fascinating. A lot of people were listening in tonight. They found it very fascinating. I mean, they heard things they never heard before, sound files that had never been played. So I know that would interest people again. So in 2 weeks, in the meantime, you and I will talk about this and see if we can get it back up. But I think it's worth repeating and letting people hear it. Well, Barbara, thank you. So I want you to let Joe know we appreciate him coming on tonight. Tell him that.
I tell him he gave up. You know, he's
He's like a rock star. I mean, I couldn't believe the amount of comments we're getting. They all love Joe, so you pass that on to him. And Barbara, we all love you too, and we want you to keep standing tall. We don't want you to ever give up. You just keep moving forward.
Yeah, no. I don't.
Okay, good.
You know, Rick, I'm Polish, and Polish people.
Well, Polish people don't give up. I get some Polish people in the family. I'm married, and they're pretty forward. Yeah, they don't give up. Well, thank you, Barbara. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now you just keep waving that flag of victory. We'll see you in 2 weeks in your program. Thank you, Barbara, very much. Appreciate it.
And be sure, folks, tell us what you want, what you like, and what you don't like. You know, we want to hear from people so that we can present. We don't want to bore you, okay?
Well, what I'm looking at here, what I do here, like any network, is I look at views. I look at the amount of people coming in on all of our various platforms. Tonight there was a lot of people. I told you that because it's starting to get a little colder. But tonight we had a lot of people listening in. We even had some of your relatives listening in. So that was good. Well, thank you, Barbara. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Good evening, Rick. Have a great rest of the evening.
Oh, you too. Thank you. All right. Well, there you go. That's Barbara Anderson. I mean, look at Barbara Anderson has made a big difference. She's helped a lot of people get out of the Watchtower. And we really want to thank her for being part of our network. Well, we got a lot of things going on. We don't want you to leave us now. Friends, don't leave us now. We got JW World News coming up next. Boy, some of the stuff you're going to hear on the news tonight, you're going to say, what? So stay with us. Don't go anywhere. Stay on the Facebook channel you're on. Stay on the YouTube channel. Stay in our telephone network, our radio network, as we call it. And we're going to end this program here, but just give us about 2 minutes, and we'll be on the other side into the new studio. Hang in with us. Thank you very much for being with us. We really do appreciate your presence.